Norway, land of the Vikings. Hi, I'm your host, Lane Vermillion, doing a bad, stereotypical Norwegian accent. To start, let us look at the map of Norway from the year 1668. Now, by this time, Norway had been converted to Christianity, as had most of Europe at the time. In addition, Norway was in the throes of a war with Sweden, who had withdrawn from what had been known as the Kalmar Union with Denmark and Norway. But now, with only Denmark and Norway left, they were simply known as Denmark-Norway, and would be known as Denmark-Norway for a long time. Denmark-Norway, as you could guess, was merely a combination of Norway and Denmark. Denmark-Norway. Norway-Denmark. Okay. Next up, we have an intricately drawn map of Norway from the year 1730. Now, at this point, Norway was heavily involved in mercantilism, and was exporting lots of lumber, especially to England, in addition to the other parts of Europe. Most recently, we have this map of Norway from 1940. Okay, I'm just gonna drop the cheesy Norwegian accent. Last but not least, we have the map of Norway from 1914, which, while I am positive that the low-resolution nature of this video is not doing it justice, I assure you this is even more intricate than the last map that was from 1730. Now, this is merely a map of the southern part of Norway, not the northern half, but this is indeed another historical map from the year 1914, which, yes, was the year that World War I broke out. So there's a little bit of historical perspective on that. Okay, now to hit on military and political leaders, we're actually going to start a little bit more recently and then move backwards. So first up, we have Ulrich Frederick Gyldenløve, Count of Larvig. He was born 20th of July, 1638, and died 1704. Pretty major general during the Scanian Wars. Or Scanian War, rather. And he was actually the illegitimate son of King Frederick III of Denmark and Norway. Because, as I said before, Denmark-Norway was Norway-Denmark, Denmark-Norway, Norway-Norway. Any way you want it, that's the way you need it. Any way you want it. Any way you want it, that's the way you need it. Any way you want it. Any way you want it, that's the way you need it. Any way you want it. Trolls in Norway, Norway's got trolls. Anyway, at the time, Ulrich Frederick was quite the military leader. He had quite the victory at the Battle of Nyborg on the 14th of November, 1659. In 1666, he became commander-in-chief of the Norwegian army. And the Norwegian army was subsequently victorious in the Scanian War. So, there is something to be said for that. Anyway, this is Sigurd the Crusader. Sigurd the Crusader was born of Magnus III of Norway. He was famous in history for bringing on what became known as the Golden Age of the medieval kingdom of Norway. He's also famous for leading the Norwegian Crusade in 1107 and 1110. But it also should be noted that he actually co-ruled with his brothers, Olaf and Eystein, until Eystein died in 1123. At which point he kind of ruled on his own in a typical king-typey fashion. Now we're going to back up even further to look at Hakon the Good. Hakon the Good was the third king of Norway, actually, and was the youngest son of Harald I of Norway and Thora Mosterstang. That's quite the name. Was sent away as a child to go and learn the ways of Christianity. Actually, not really. He was just sent to England because his father, King Harold, who was Harold Fairhair, the first king of Norway, I'll get to him in a minute, wanted him out of harm's way. So he went to a friend of the court, King Athelstan of England. Hakon was basically brought up in England, but when he found out that his father died, he came back and decided to go ahead and start an expedition against his half-brother, Eric Bloodaxe. I'm not kidding, this guy's name was Eric Bloodaxe. That's frightening. Anyway, Hakon the Good went and rose up an army against his brother, Eric Bloodaxe, who was
threatening and powerful and dangerous and remembered pretty kindly by the Norwegian people, unless I'm getting the wrong idea from the multiple sources I'm using from the internet. Long story short, Eric ended up dying, but his sons kind of succeeded him, but then Hakon fought with his sons, and there's a whole fight over the claim to the throne, because really nobody deserved it, but yeah. Okay, now getting back to Harald Fairhair, first king of Norway. He was the father of both Hakon the Good and Eric Bloodaxe. He had quite a few sons, but Eric was his favorite. He handed off all of his power to Eric when he was approximately 80, and intended for him to succeed him, which ended up not working out perfectly because Hakon the Good had different ideas. Bottom line is, all of that put together, somewhere in there were the equivalent of 2 slides about a famous political leader and 2 slides about a famous military leader. Because, as was the case in most Scandinavian countries, and really most countries in general until more recently in history, there's not a huge difference between political leaders and military leaders. So, if you would be so kind as to knock those off on your little checklist right now, Mrs. Wood, I would love you even more than I already do. And have I mentioned that I love you? I do. Please don't smite me. Okay, moving on. To reward you all for sitting through 7 minutes of my incoherent rambling, I'm now going to show you pretty pictures of Norway in order to showcase the geographical features of this beautiful country. Did I mention geographical features? Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm back. Now you have to look at some architectural features of Norway and whatnot. So, here goes those. Hey, how's this for brief, erratic food for thought? Yes, civil wars have happened in Norway, not recently. I kind of covered that when I went over the political and military leaders earlier in this little whatever this is now, but just thought I would throw that out there, making sure that I got my points on that one. Really, seriously, let me summarize it real quick. Basically, Harald Fairhair unified Norway in like 872 at the Battle of Hafrsfjord. Then after that, you have King Sigurd the Crusader, who I already hit on. And then basically everyone ever decided they had a right to the throne, and none of them did. So there was lots of infighting amongst the tribes of Norway, for lack of a better term. Generally, historians agree that the whole Civil War thing ended as soon as Duke Skule Bardsson was put down in 1240. He tried to rise up, and that didn't happen. Because there were 2 parties, there were the Birkebeiner and the Bagler, and they reconciled in 1217, and the king was gradually able to bring things to a more happy, stable something. Alright. So as far as demographics go, there's approximately 5 million Norwegians in the world. About 5 million people. Yeah, going off of rough estimates based upon the statistics given in 2010, in which there were about 4,858,000 people. Anyway, about 5 million people live in Norway. And according to this chart that I'm looking at right here, approximately 3.9 million of them identify as Lutheran. The overwhelming majority of Norwegians identify as Lutheran. Basically, outside of Lutheranism, the only other thing that people identify as is just irreligious. Either you're a Lutheran in Norway or you're irreligious. That would be the sum total of it, from what I can gather.
So what you're looking at now is a horrible timeline. It's actually a good timeline, but a horrible picture of a good timeline of the Norwegian people as a whole. So first off, we have the Bronze Age, which would have introduced using plows and basic simple weapons and tools to the Norwegians. Subsequently, after that, starting at 500 before Christ, we entered the Iron Age, which really sort of enabled the entire Viking thing to happen, with the whole weapons and better tools and shipbuilding and whatnot stuff going on there. And it was all fantastical. You jump forward a great whole big ton of time, and what you're looking at is all kinds of fun advances in Norwegian history, which have not been placed on this timeline due to primarily space constraints. To that being said, hitting on most of Norway's current technology would be completely pointless, as it's pretty similar to America, as it is in most of Western Europe. Norway is huge in pioneering in renewable energy especially. They've been fantastic about renewable energy, but they've also been kind of not so fantastic about using all kinds of non-renewable energy in the form of oil, but that's okay, because they've still got plenty. And also, Norway, pretty big in the telecommunication industry. A couple of companies have made their way into America from Norway, but for the most part they've been constrained to Europe, but that being said, they've been fairly large in Europe. What you're looking at now is a photo of a huge oil operation off the coast of Norway. And this is a pretty common sight off the coast of Norway, as the largest part of Norway's economy, at least in terms of exports to other countries, has been in oil since the 1960s, when oil was discovered off the coast of Norway. Now, that being said, it should be taken into account that Norway's level of exportation is not sustainable over a long period of time. And to sum it up in the words of my good friend Mr. Morgan Freeman, I'd like to tell you that Norway exporting oil at the current level it does was sustainable over a long period of time. I'd like to tell you that. But Norway's current oil situation reminded me of my days back in Shawshank Correctional Center with Mr. Andy Dufresne. I am Morgan Freeman. I am Morgan Freeman. Now for the story of a Scandinavian country that had cool things, and the one student who had no choice but to make an Arrested Development reference. It's cultural development. Obscure references aside, it's really quite difficult to detail the cultural development of a country like Norway, as it has developed pretty much alongside the rest of Western Europe, in a manner similar to America and Western Europe, because they kind of really started developing the same way towards the end of the 18th century. Now, that being said, I have flashed up a couple of things on the screen by now that have been distinctly Norwegian culture. So that should at least get me some points on this whole cultural development slide. Alright. Well, kids, I'm sad to say it, but we've reached the end of our time together, as I've covered everything on the rubric, and I have no reason to continue torturing you people with my incoherent ramblings, but God bless you all through sitting through all of this. As they would say in Norway, farvel, and ha det bra.